They laughed at the billionaire's wife that night, not knowing the fortune they were mocking would soon decide the fate of their entire empire. The crystal chandeliers of the Blackwood estate cast a golden glow across the vast dining hall, reflecting off polished marble floors and the quiet confidence of people who believed they owned the world. Outside, the manicured lawn stretched across nearly 20 acres of prime Connecticut land, a symbol of the Blackwood family's wealth and influence that had taken 3 generations to build. Inside, the long mahogany table shimmered beneath silver candle holders and delicate china imported from France, every detail arranged to project perfection. At the far end of the table sat Victoria Blackwood, the matriarch whose presence alone could silence a room. Her diamond necklace caught the light as she lifted her glass with graceful precision, her posture straight, her expression calm but calculating. Around her sat the city's most influential guests, investment partners, politicians, and social figures who had come to celebrate another milestone in the Blackwood legacy. But tonight's dinner was not truly about celebration. It was about judgment, and the woman being judged sat quietly halfway down the table. Maya Carter wore a simple midnight blue dress that contrasted sharply with the glittering gowns around her. The fabric was elegant but understated, her jewelry minimal, her posture calm. She folded her hands neatly in her lap, her expression serene despite the quiet glances and whispered comments drifting across the table like invisible smoke. To the Blackwood family, Maya had always been a puzzle they never bothered to solve. 3 years earlier, their heir, Ethan Blackwood, had shocked everyone by marrying her after a brief courtship that none of them had approved. To them, Maya was an outsider who appeared from nowhere. No famous last name, no powerful connections, no visible fortune. In their world, that meant only one thing. She must have married for money. Ethan sat a few seats away, tall and composed in his tailored charcoal suit, the quiet authority of a billionaire so evident in every measured movement he made. His company, Blackwood Holdings, had expanded from a regional investment firm into a multinational corporation worth several $billion. At 38, Ethan was respected, feared, and admired in equal measure. But even men who command boardrooms sometimes remain silent in their own homes. Tonight, he watched the room carefully, sensing the tension beneath. The polite smiles, yet saying nothing. The dinner progressed with polite conversation, the clinking of silverware and soft classical music filling the air. But beneath the elegance, Victoria Blackwood had been waiting for the exact moment to strike. She gently set down her wine glass and looked across the table with a composed smile that carried the weight of authority. "Family," she began smoothly, her voice calm enough to draw everyone's attention without effort. "Tonight is about legacy. The Blackwood name has always stood for excellence, discipline, and careful choices." A few guests nodded respectfully. Victoria's eyes slowly turned toward Maya. The room grew quieter. "Sometimes," Victoria continued, her tone still pleasant but edged with something sharper, "people enter a family without truly understanding the standards that built it." A soft ripple of laughter passed among a few guests who understood exactly what she meant. Maya remained still. She did not reach for her glass. She did not look down. She simply listened. Victoria leaned back slightly, her diamonds shimmering beneath the chandelier. "After all," she added with a faint smile, "some people marry into wealth because they have nothing of their own." The sentence hung in the air like frost. A few guests exchanged glances. Vanessa Blackwood, Ethan's younger sister, smirked openly while swirling the wine in her glass. "Mother," she added casually, "I suppose charity comes in many forms." Another ripple of quiet laughter followed. Ethan shifted slightly in his chair, but the moment passed before he spoke. All eyes drifted toward Maya. Yet the woman they expected to see crumble did something entirely different. Maya Carter slowly lifted her gaze toward Victoria Blackwood. Her expression remained calm, almost thoughtful, as though she were studying a detail others could not see. For a long moment, she said nothing at all. Then, with quiet dignity, she placed her napkin gently on the table. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft but unmistakably steady. "Thank you," she said. The room fell completely silent. Maya stood gracefully beside her chair, the candlelight catching the calm strength in her eyes. "Thank you," she repeated, "for showing me exactly what this family believes is valuable." She turned slightly, her gaze passing briefly over Ethan before returning to the room. Now I understand. And with that, Maya Carter walked away from the Blackwood dinner table, leaving behind a silence none of them yet understood would soon cost them everything. The grand dining hall remained silent long after Maya Carter disappeared beyond the tall oak doors of the Blackwood estate, the echo of her calm voice lingering beneath the glittering chandeliers like a question no one in the room was prepared to answer. For a moment, no one moved. The orchestra music from the adjoining room continued softly, unaware that the atmosphere inside the estate had shifted in a way none of them yet understood. Victoria Blackwood slowly lifted her glass again, her expression unchanged, but the faint tension in her fingers betrayed a flicker of irritation beneath her polished composure. Well, she said with a thin smile, that was unnecessarily dramatic. A few guests chuckled politely, though their laughter sounded uncertain now. Vanessa leaned back in her chair and shrugged with casual dismissal. Honestly, Mother, if she could not handle a simple conversation, perhaps she was never suited for this family. Silverware clinked softly as several guests returned to their meals, eager to restore the illusion of elegance. But Ethan Blackwood had not moved. His eyes remained fixed on the doorway where Maya had disappeared, the quiet dignity of her exit replaying in his mind with uncomfortable clarity. Ethan had built his career on reading subtle signals, the smallest shift in tone during a billion-dollar negotiation, the slightest hesitation from a rival across a boardroom table. Yet tonight he realized something unsettling. He had failed to read the most important signal of all. He pushed his chair back slowly, the soft scrape against the marble floor drawing attention across the table. Victoria looked toward him with mild curiosity. "Ethan," she said calmly, "your wife seems rather sensitive." Ethan did not immediately respond. Instead, he placed his napkin beside his plate with deliberate care. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Without waiting for permission, he walked toward the same doors Maya had used only moments earlier. Outside, the cool Connecticut night stretched across the sprawling estate grounds, the air carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. The driveway curved through acres of manicured lawn illuminated by subtle garden lights. Maya Carter stood near the edge of the stone terrace overlooking the property, her posture calm as she gazed toward the distant tree line. She had not hurried. She had not cried. She simply stood there in silence as the soft wind moved gently through the fabric of her dress. When Ethan stepped onto the terrace, he paused for a moment, studying the woman he had married 3 years earlier. For the first time that evening, he noticed something he had overlooked before. Maya did not look humiliated. She looked resolved. "Maya," he said quietly. She turned slightly toward him, her expression composed. The candlelight from inside the estate spilled faintly across her face, revealing eyes that were calm but distant. "Are you leaving?" Ethan asked. Maya considered the question as if weighing something deeper than the words themselves. "Yes," she said simply. Ethan frowned slightly. "You are upset because of what my mother said." Maya tilted her head gently, almost thoughtful. "No," she replied. "I am leaving because now I understand something clearly." Ethan stepped closer, the gravel beneath his shoes crunching softly. "Understand what?" Maya looked back toward the glowing windows of the estate where the Blackwood family continued their dinner. "Your family believes wealth defines a person's worth," she said calmly. "That belief makes many things easier for them." Ethan crossed his arms, his voice firm but controlled. "You know that is not how I see things." Maya studied him quietly for a moment. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but silence can sometimes sound like agreement." Ethan did not immediately respond. The wind rustled through the trees at the edge of the property, carrying the distant hum of the city nearly 30 miles away. Finally he spoke again. "Where will you go?" Maya smiled faintly, though there was no bitterness in it. "I will be exactly where I need to be." Ethan opened his mouth as if to continue the conversation, but Maya gently raised her hand. "Ethan," she said calmly, "tonight was not the moment that changed everything." He looked at her with confusion. Maya's gaze drifted briefly toward the distant road leading away from the estate. It was only the moment when the truth finally became visible. In the distance, the quiet sound of an approaching car engine began to echo along the long driveway leading to the estate gates, though neither of them yet understood that the events set in motion tonight would soon reveal just how much the Blackwood family had misjudged the woman they believed they already knew. The quiet sound of the approaching car grew louder as its headlights slowly appeared at the far end of the long Blackwood driveway, cutting through the darkness like two pale beams sliding across the manicured lawn. Ethan noticed the vehicle first, his eyes narrowing slightly as the unfamiliar sedan rolled past the iron gates and followed the curved stone path toward the estate. The Blackwood estate rarely received unexpected visitors. Every arrival was usually planned days in advance, recorded by security, and announced with careful precision. Yet this car moved forward with quiet confidence, as if it already belonged there. Maya Carter stood beside the terrace railing without turning around. She had heard the engine long before Ethan had noticed it, but she showed no surprise. The vehicle came to a smooth stop near the front steps of the mansion, its dark paint reflecting the golden lights of the estate like still water beneath moonlight. A man stepped out from the driver's seat, tall and composed in a tailored navy suit. His posture carried the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to handling serious matters. He adjusted his glasses and looked toward the terrace with recognition the moment his eyes found Maya. Ethan watched the scene with growing curiosity. "Do you know him?" Ethan asked quietly. Maya turned slightly, her expression calm. "Yes," she replied. The man walked up the wide stone steps with measured confidence until he reached the terrace entrance. When he spoke, his tone carried a respectful professionalism that immediately changed the atmosphere of the evening. "Miss Carter," he said politely, offering a small nod. "I apologize for arriving during your personal time, but the matter we discussed earlier required confirmation tonight." Ethan frowned slightly. The formality of the greeting felt unusual. The man was not addressing Maya as a family member of the Blackwood household. He was addressing her as someone important in her own right. Maya nodded gently. "Thank you for coming, Daniel." Ethan looked between them. "Maya," he said carefully, "what is going on?" Daniel Carter adjusted the slim folder he carried beneath his arm before speaking again. "My name is Daniel Carter. I am the chief legal advisor for Carter Global Foundation." The name meant nothing to Ethan at first, but something about the way Daniel spoke it suggested weight behind the words. Maya remained silent, allowing the moment to settle. Daniel continued calmly. "Miss Carter asked me earlier today to finalize certain arrangements regarding her departure from the Blackwood estate." Ethan's expression tightened. Slightly. "Departure?" he repeated. Maya turned to face him fully now. The soft terrace lights illuminated her calm expression. "I told you I was leaving," she said gently. Ethan crossed his arms, still trying to understand the situation. "You called a lawyer before dinner?" Maya did not answer immediately. Daniel opened the folder and withdrew several neatly prepared documents. "To clarify," Daniel said respectfully, "Miss Carter did not call me tonight. These arrangements were prepared several weeks ago." Ethan blinked once, surprised. "Weeks?" Maya nodded slowly. "I wanted to make sure everything was handled properly," she said. Ethan stared at her, searching for anger or bitterness in her voice. But there was none, only quiet certainty. Daniel continued speaking with professional precision. "Miss Carter's transportation has been arranged, along with the relocation of her personal assets and corporate responsibilities." Ethan frowned again. "Corporate responsibilities?" Daniel paused briefly before answering. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Miss Carter oversees several major financial operations connected to Carter Global Foundation." Ethan felt a faint chill of confusion. "I thought Carter Foundation was a charitable investment fund based in New York." Daniel inclined his head slightly. "That is correct." Ethan looked back at Maya, his voice quieter now. "And what does that have to do with you?" Maya met his gaze calmly. "Everything." Daniel carefully closed the folder and spoke with the steady tone of someone delivering information that would soon become public knowledge. "Miss Carter is not simply associated with the foundation," he said. "She is the primary executive authority responsible for managing its global investments." Ethan stared at him in silence. The cool night wind drifted across the terrace as the lights from the estate shimmered behind them. Daniel's final words settled into the air with quiet clarity. "In other words, Mr. Blackwood," he said respectfully, "your wife is the person who controls Carter Global Foundation." Ethan's expression slowly shifted from confusion toward disbelief. Because Carter Global Foundation was not just another charity. It was a financial powerhouse managing billions of dollars in global investments, partnerships, and philanthropic projects. And the woman his family had just mocked at dinner was the one person standing at the center of it all. The night air on the Blackwood terrace felt noticeably colder after Daniel Carter's words settled into silence. Ethan Blackwood stood motionless for several seconds, his mind carefully replaying the statement as if searching for some logical explanation that would make it less impossible. Carter Global Foundation was not a small charity. It was one of the most influential private investment foundations in the country, known for managing billions of dollars across healthcare, renewable energy, and international infrastructure projects. The foundation partnered with governments, funded universities, and quietly held stakes in companies that shaped entire industries. Ethan knew the organization well. Blackwood Holdings had once attempted to secure a joint venture with Carter Global 2 years earlier. The proposal had been rejected without explanation. Now he slowly turned his gaze back to Maya, studying her face as if he were seeing her for the first time. "You run Carter Global Foundation," he repeated quietly. Maya did not rush to respond. She simply looked at him with the same calm expression she had carried throughout the evening. "I oversee its investment operations," she said gently. Ethan let out a quiet breath, the realization forming piece by piece. "That foundation manages more than $5 billion in assets," he said. Daniel Carter nodded respectfully. $5.3 billion as of the last fiscal report. The number hung in the air with quiet weight. Ethan looked back toward the brightly lit windows of the estate where his family and their guests were still enjoying dinner, unaware that the woman they had dismissed only minutes earlier controlled an empire far larger than they imagined. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked finally. Maya's answer came without hesitation. "Because I wanted to know whether I was loved as Maya," she said softly, "or respected only because of a balance sheet." Ethan lowered his gaze briefly. He had always known Maya valued privacy, but he had never imagined her silence hid something this significant. Daniel spoke again with professional clarity. Miss Carter intentionally kept her professional identity separate from her personal life. Only a very small number of senior partners are aware of her direct authority within the foundation. Ethan looked back at Maya. "Even after we were married?" Maya nodded slowly. "Especially after we were married." The wind moved quietly through the trees surrounding the estate, carrying the distant hum of traffic from the highway nearly 2 miles away. Ethan leaned against the terrace railing, absorbing the weight of the truth. "My family believes you married me for money," he said. Maya gave a faint, almost reflective smile. "Yes, that has been made very clear tonight." Ethan rubbed his temple slowly, frustration creeping into his voice. "They were wrong." Maya studied him for a moment before replying. "Perhaps," she said, but the belief itself revealed something more important. Ethan looked at her again. "What do you mean?" Maya glanced toward the mansion where the music from inside drifted softly into the night air. "It revealed how easily people measure worth," she said quietly. "Not by character, not by kindness, only by visible wealth." Daniel remained respectfully silent, allowing the conversation to unfold. Ethan straightened slightly. "You could have corrected them tonight," he said. "One sentence would have ended everything." Maya looked directly into his eyes. "Yes," she said calmly, "but that would have changed nothing about how they see the world." Ethan had spent his entire career navigating complex negotiations and corporate rivalries. Yet this quiet conversation felt more complicated than any boardroom battle he had faced. "So this was a test?" he asked slowly. Maya shook her head gently. "No," she replied. "This was clarity." The word lingered between them. Ethan looked down at the terrace floor for a moment before speaking again. "And now?" Maya turned slightly toward the driveway, where the car that brought Daniel waited patiently, with its engine idling. "Now I leave," she said. Ethan's voice lowered. "And our marriage?" Maya did not answer immediately. The soft lights from the estate reflected in her eyes as she looked back toward the house one final time. "Marriage," she said quietly, "cannot survive without respect." Ethan felt the weight of that sentence more heavily than any accusation. Inside the mansion, laughter from the dinner guests echoed faintly across the terrace, still unaware that the evening had already begun to reshape the future of the Blackwood family in ways none of them could yet imagine. For several seconds after Maya spoke, the terrace remained quiet except for the faint rustling of leaves across the vast Blackwood estate. Ethan Blackwood stood still beside the stone railing, the words respect and marriage echoing in his thoughts with unsettling clarity. Throughout his life, he had been surrounded by wealth, by negotiations measured in millions of dollars, by decisions that shaped markets and industries. Yet standing there beneath the cool Connecticut night sky, he realized he had overlooked something far simpler and far more important. Inside the mansion, the dinner continued though nothing unusual had happened. Laughter drifted faintly through the open terrace doors while glasses clinked and a pianist played soft classical music near the grand staircase. The Blackwood family believed the evening had already returned to normal, but on the terrace, normal had quietly disappeared. Ethan looked at Maya again, noticing details he had ignored for years. The calm steadiness in her posture, the quiet confidence in the way she spoke. None of it resembled the image his family had painted of her. "You planned this weeks ago," he said slowly, recalling Daniel's earlier statement. Maya did not deny it. "I prepared for the possibility," she replied gently. "I hoped it would never be necessary." Ethan exhaled quietly. "Because of my family." Maya's expression softened slightly. "Because of the environment around them," she said. "Beliefs do not appear suddenly. They grow slowly." Ethan leaned his hands against the cool stone railing, his voice quieter now. "Why did you stay this long if you knew how they felt about you?" Maya turned toward the estate one last time, her gaze lingering on the glowing windows that framed the elegant dining hall. "Because I believed time could change perspective," she said softly. "I believed that kindness and patience might eventually speak louder than assumptions." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, understanding the quiet disappointment behind her words. "And tonight proved otherwise," he said. Maya nodded once. Tonight revealed the truth more clearly than any conversation could. Daniel Carter stepped forward slightly, maintaining his respectful tone. "Miss Carter, the car is ready whenever you are." Maya gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The waiting vehicle remained parked near the front entrance, its headlights illuminating the wide circular driveway like a path leading away from the estate. Ethan noticed the movement and felt a tightening in his chest that surprised him. "Maya," he said, his voice firmer now, "leaving like this does not solve anything." Maya turned toward him again. "Sometimes distance is the only way clarity can grow," she replied. Ethan studied her face, searching for hesitation. "You are talking about ending our marriage." Maya did not immediately confirm the statement. Instead, she spoke with quiet honesty. "I am talking about stepping away from a place where respect has not been present." Ethan felt the weight of that distinction. The difference between ending something and stepping away from it was subtle but powerful. He straightened slightly. "If respect is the problem, then it can be addressed," he said. Maya's expression remained calm but thoughtful. "Respect cannot be requested," she said. "It must already exist." The breeze across the terrace carried the distant sound of the estate gates opening as another car passed along the nearby road outside the property. Ethan looked toward the driveway where Daniel waited beside the sedan, then back toward Maya. For the first time since the conversation began, uncertainty appeared in his voice. "If you leave tonight," he said slowly, "everything changes." Maya gave a faint nod. "Yes," she said quietly. "Sometimes change is necessary before anything can truly improve." Ethan watched as she stepped away from the railing and began walking toward the front steps of the estate where the car waited. Daniel followed a respectful distance behind her. The golden lights of the mansion illuminated her path across the stone terrace, her calm figure moving steadily toward the driveway. Ethan remained where he stood, listening to the distant laughter still drifting from inside the house. His family believed they had simply embarrassed an unwelcome outsider. They did not yet realize they had just driven away the one person whose influence could shape the future of the Blackwood legacy itself. The gravel beneath Maya Carter's heels made a quiet, rhythmic sound as she walked across the long stone terrace toward the wide front steps of the Blackwood estate, each step steady and unhurried, as if she had already accepted the weight of the decision forming behind her. The golden lights from the mansion cast long shadows across the driveway, while the dark sedan waited with its engine running, its polished surface reflecting the towering columns of the estate. Daniel Carter walked beside her with calm professionalism, carrying the slim folder that now represented the final line between Maya's past life inside the Blackwood family and whatever future waited beyond those gates. Behind them, Ethan Blackwood still stood near the terrace railing, his mind struggling to keep pace with the quiet storm unfolding in front of him. For years he had believed he understood the world clearly. Success had always followed logic, strategy, and calculated risk. But nothing about this moment followed the rules he had spent his life mastering. Maya reached the bottom of the steps and paused briefly beside the car door. Daniel moved forward to open it, but she lifted her hand slightly, signaling that she was not ready to leave just yet. For a moment, she simply looked back at the estate. The Blackwood mansion stood illuminated against the dark sky like a monument to legacy and pride. Every polished window and towering pillar represented generations of wealth carefully protected and fiercely defended. Inside those walls, the dinner guests still believed the evening had returned to comfortable elegance. They believed the awkward moment had passed. None of them knew that the woman they had dismissed only minutes earlier had already changed the direction of their future. Ethan finally moved. The distance between the terrace and the driveway was not far, yet each step he took felt heavier than the last. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, Maya turned slightly toward him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The quiet hum of the car engine and the distant sound of music from inside the mansion filled the silence between them. "You are really leaving," Ethan said at last, his voice calmer than the tension building beneath it. Maya nodded gently. "Yes." Ethan looked toward the dark road beyond the estate gates, and then back at her. "You built an entire life I never knew about," he said slowly. Maya's answer carried no accusation. "I built a life before I met you," she said. "And I protected it after we married." Ethan frowned slightly. "Protected it from me?" Maya shook her head. "From assumptions." The words settled heavily between them. Ethan had spent the entire evening watching his family make those exact assumptions. Now he saw the full cost of them. Daniel spoke quietly, his tone respectful but precise. "Miss Carter, the airport arrangements are prepared. Your flight departs from Teterboro in 1 hour." Ethan's head turned sharply. "You are leaving the state tonight?" Maya nodded again. "There is a board meeting in San Francisco tomorrow morning." Ethan let out a quiet breath, the scale of her responsibilities becoming clearer with every passing minute. "You planned everything," he said. Maya met his gaze calmly. "I prepared for the moment when staying no longer made sense." Ethan ran a hand slowly through his hair as he looked back toward the mansion where his family continued their evening without concern. "If my mother knew who you were," he said quietly, "this dinner would have been very different." Maya's faint smile returned, but it carried no pride. "That is exactly the problem," she said. "Respect should not depend on knowing someone's bank account." Ethan had no immediate answer. The estate lights flickered gently across the driveway as a breeze moved through the tall maple trees lining the property. Maya placed one hand lightly on the open car door and then looked at Ethan one final time. "Ethan," she said softly, "tonight did not destroy anything." He looked at her with confusion. Maya's voice remained calm but certain. "Tonight only revealed what was already broken." The words settled into the quiet air like a truth neither of them could ignore. Then Maya Carter stepped into the waiting car, and for the first time since the Blackwood family welcomed her into their world 3 years earlier, the gates of the estate slowly began to close behind her. The heavy iron gates of the Blackwood estate closed slowly behind the departing car, the quiet metallic sound echoing across the long driveway, as the sedan carrying Maya Carter disappeared into the dark Connecticut road beyond the property. Inside the vehicle, the interior lights remained dim, allowing the city skyline in the distance to glow faintly through the window like a quiet promise of the world waiting ahead. Maya sat calmly in the back seat, her hands folded loosely in her lap as the estate grew smaller behind them. Daniel Carter sat in the front passenger seat reviewing several documents on his tablet, though he occasionally glanced back to ensure she was comfortable. Neither of them spoke for the first several minutes. The quiet hum of the engine and the gentle rhythm of the tires against the asphalt filled the silence. Finally, Daniel lowered the tablet and turned slightly in his seat. "Miss Carter," he said respectfully, "I am sorry the evening unfolded the way it did." Maya looked out the window for another moment before responding. "There is nothing to apologize for, Daniel," she said softly. "Tonight simply clarified things." Daniel nodded once. He had worked with Maya for nearly 6 years and understood that when she used the word clarify, it meant the decision had already been made long before the moment itself arrived. The car merged onto the highway heading south toward New Jersey, where the private airport waited less than 40 miles away. Streetlights passed rhythmically overhead, casting brief flashes of light across the interior of the car. Meanwhile, back at the Blackwood estate, Ethan Blackwood remained standing alone in the driveway long after the vehicle disappeared from sight. The cold night air settled around him as the realization of what had just happened slowly began to take shape in his mind. Maya had not stormed away in anger. She had not argued or defended herself against the insults thrown at her during dinner. Instead, she had simply left with the calm certainty of someone who had already moved beyond the need to explain anything at all. Ethan turned slowly and walked back toward the mansion. As he stepped inside, the warm golden lights and elegant music returned, but the atmosphere now felt strangely hollow. Several guests noticed his arrival and greeted him with polite smiles, assuming he had simply stepped outside for fresh air. Vanessa Blackwood approached him first, swirling the wine in her glass with casual amusement. "Well," she said with a smirk, "did the princess manage to compose herself?" Ethan looked at his sister for a moment before answering. "She left." Vanessa shrugged. "Honestly, that might be for the best." Victoria Blackwood appeared beside them a moment later, her composed expression unchanged as she adjusted the cuff of her elegant jacket. "Some people simply do not belong in certain environments," she said calmly. Ethan studied his mother's face carefully, searching for any hint of doubt. There was none. The conversation around them resumed as if nothing important had occurred. Yet Ethan felt the weight of knowledge sitting heavily in his chest. "Mother," he said quietly, "what do you know about Carter Global Foundation?" Victoria glanced at him briefly, mildly surprised by the question. "One of the larger philanthropic investment groups in the country," she replied. "Why?" Ethan's voice remained steady. "Because Maya runs it." The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. Vanessa stopped mid-sip, her glass frozen in the air. Victoria's composed expression tightened slightly, the first crack in her confidence appearing beneath the chandelier lights. "That is not possible," Vanessa said quickly. Ethan did not raise his voice. "Daniel Carter confirmed it tonight." Victoria placed her glass slowly on the table, her mind already calculating the implications. Carter Global Foundation controlled billions of dollars in investments across industries that overlapped directly with several of Blackwood Holdings' largest strategic expansions. Vanessa laughed nervously. "If that were true, we would have known." Ethan looked directly at her. "You did know," he said quietly. "You simply never bothered to ask who she really was." Across the room, several guests continued discussing business deals and charity events, completely unaware that the balance of power inside the Blackwood family had shifted in a single evening. And for the first time since the dinner began, Victoria Blackwood felt something unfamiliar pressing quietly against her certainty. Uncertainty. The atmosphere inside the Blackwood dining hall changed in a way that none of the guests immediately understood. The elegant music still drifted through the room, and crystal glasses still reflected the golden chandelier light. Yet an invisible tension had settled over the table where the Blackwood family sat. Victoria Blackwood remained perfectly still for several seconds after Ethan's words. "Maya runs Carter Global Foundation." The sentence repeated itself quietly in her mind, each time sounding more improbable than the last. For decades, Victoria had navigated elite circles of finance and philanthropy with precise awareness of who held real influence. Names mattered in that world. Legacies mattered. The idea that someone controlling an organization worth more than $5 billion could sit at her dinner table for 3 years without revealing her position seemed impossible. Vanessa broke the silence first, her voice carrying a nervous edge that had not been present earlier in the evening. "That cannot be true," she said quickly. "Someone running a foundation that size would appear in financial media. We would have seen her name." Ethan leaned slightly against the back of his chair, his expression calm but firm. "Carter Global does not operate like most corporations," he said. "Their leadership structure is intentionally private." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly as pieces of information she had once dismissed began quietly rearranging themselves in her mind. Over the past 3 years, there had been moments that now felt different when viewed through this new perspective. The discreet donations that had appeared anonymously at several Blackwood charity events. the subtle influence behind a hospital expansion project that had unexpectedly secured funding within days. The quiet phone call Maya once took during a family vacation before excusing herself for several hours. At the time, Victoria had assumed those moments were small personal matters. Now they seemed like shadows of something much larger. Across the table, several guests had begun to notice the shift in conversation. One of the investment partners, Robert Hastings, leaned slightly toward Ethan with curious interest. Carter Global Foundation, he said thoughtfully. They recently financed that renewable energy corridor across Nevada. That project alone was worth nearly $2 billion. Vanessa looked from Robert back to Ethan, disbelief slowly giving way to unease. You were saying Maya was responsible for something like that? Ethan did not hesitate. Daniel Carter confirmed she oversees their investment operations. Victoria lifted her glass slowly but did not drink. Her mind was already moving through the implications with quiet precision. Carter Global Foundation had recently entered negotiations with several major firms regarding infrastructure expansion along the West Coast. Blackwood Holdings had also been preparing a bid for a portion of that project. If Maya truly controlled the foundation's investment decisions, then the balance of influence between the two organizations had been dramatically misunderstood. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Why would she hide something like that, she asked. Ethan's answer came quietly but clearly. Because she wanted to be treated like a person instead of a financial opportunity. The words hung in the air longer than anyone expected. Around them, the other guests slowly returned to their conversations, though the energy in the room felt noticeably different. Victoria placed her glass down carefully and stood from the table. Her voice remained calm, but the certainty that had defined her earlier remarks had softened into something more cautious. Ethan, she said, are you absolutely certain about this? Ethan met her gaze steadily. Yes. Victoria turned slightly toward the tall windows overlooking the dark estate grounds. Somewhere beyond the property gates, Maya Carter was already miles away, heading toward a future that might now intersect with the Blackwood family in ways none of them had anticipated. For the first time that evening, Victoria allowed herself to consider a possibility she had not entertained before. If Maya truly controlled Carter Global Foundation, then the quiet woman they had dismissed at dinner might now hold influence capable of shaping the financial future of the Blackwood empire itself. The dinner at the Blackwood estate ended far earlier than anyone had planned, although no one openly admitted that the mood of the evening had shifted beyond repair. Guests began leaving with polite smiles and quiet goodbyes, their luxury cars disappearing down the long circular driveway one by one, while the chandeliers inside the mansion continued to glow with the same polished elegance. Yet the conversation that lingered in everyone's mind was no longer about charity projects or investment opportunities. It was about the quiet woman who had walked out of the room with more composure than anyone expected. Victoria Blackwood stood alone near the tall windows overlooking the dark lawn, her posture straight as always, but the reflection in the glass revealed the faint tension in her expression. She had spent decades mastering control in every social and financial situation she entered. Control came from information, from knowing exactly who stood across the table. Tonight she realized she had misjudged someone standing inside her own home. Across the room, Ethan remained near the dining table, while several of the remaining guests spoke quietly among themselves. Robert Hastings approached him again, curiosity still evident in his voice. Ethan, I need to ask something directly, he said carefully. If Maya Carter truly runs Carter Global Foundation, then your family may have just offended one of the most influential investors in the country. Ethan gave a small nod. That possibility has crossed my mind. Robert lowered his voice slightly. Your mother understands what that could mean, correct? Ethan glanced briefly toward Victoria before answering. She is beginning to. The last guests soon departed, leaving the mansion unusually quiet. Staff members cleared the dining table, while the faint scent of candle wax and polished wood lingered in the air. Vanessa paced slowly near the fireplace, her earlier confidence replaced by restless uncertainty. This is absurd, she muttered. If Maya had that kind of power, she would have used it long ago. Ethan looked at his sister calmly. She did not need to. Vanessa stopped pacing. What is that supposed to mean? Ethan walked toward the large windows and looked out into the darkness beyond the estate grounds. Influence does not always need to be displayed, he said quietly. Sometimes it is simply present. Victoria finally turned from the window, her voice measured. There is a difference between influence and control, she said. Ethan met her gaze. Carter Global Foundation controls more than $5 billion in capital investments across infrastructure, healthcare, and renewable energy, he replied. That is not influence. That is control. The room fell silent again. Victoria moved slowly toward the long dining table and rested her hand against the polished wood surface. For the first time that evening, the certainty in her voice had softened. You are telling me that for 3 years, she said carefully. The woman we believed married into our family for wealth was already wealthier than most people in this room. Ethan did not answer immediately. The truth felt heavier every time it was spoken aloud. Vanessa crossed her arms. Even if that is true, she said defensively, why would she tolerate the way we treated her? Ethan's response came quietly but firmly. Because she loved me. The simplicity of the answer settled across the room like a quiet weight. Victoria looked down briefly, considering that possibility with a seriousness she had not shown earlier. Love had never been the primary currency in the circles she moved through. Reputation, alliances, influence, those were the measures she trusted. Yet Maya Carter had lived among them without using any of those advantages. Vanessa finally spoke again, her voice more cautious now. Where is she going tonight? Ethan answered without turning from the window. San Francisco. There is a Carter Global Board meeting tomorrow morning. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly as she absorbed the significance of that detail. If Maya returned to her role publicly after tonight, then the Foundation's leadership might soon be fully aware of what had happened inside the Blackwood estate. And if that occurred, the consequences might reach far beyond a single uncomfortable dinner. Ethan remained silent as he stared into the dark distance beyond the estate gates. Somewhere out there, Maya Carter was already moving forward with the same calm determination she had shown all evening. And for the first time since their marriage began, Ethan realized that the quiet strength he had once taken for granted might now determine whether the future of the Blackwood family remained secure or quietly slipped beyond their control. The Blackwood estate grew unusually quiet after the final guest departed, the large iron doors of the mansion closing softly as the staff finished clearing the remnants of what had once been an elegant dinner. The long dining table now stood empty beneath the chandelier lights, the polished wood reflecting a room that felt far different from the confident gathering that had filled it only an hour earlier. Ethan Blackwood remained standing near the window overlooking the estate grounds, his attention fixed on the distant road beyond the property. Gates. The night stretched calm and dark across the Connecticut countryside, but inside the mansion a quiet tension continued to build. Victoria Blackwood walked slowly into the study adjacent to the dining hall, her measured footsteps echoing across the marble floor. She had spent most of the last hour making discreet phone calls, verifying information that until tonight she had never considered necessary. Financial databases, corporate filings, foundation records, all of them told the same story. Carter Global Foundation operated through a network of investment partnerships and private capital funds that collectively controlled more than $5 billion in global assets. And buried within the foundation's executive leadership structure was a name that now appeared impossible to ignore. Maya Carter. Victoria closed the tablet in her hand and looked toward Ethan, who had followed her into the study. The information is correct, she said quietly. Ethan did not appear surprised. I told you it was. Victoria's voice remained calm, but the certainty she usually carried had been replaced with careful calculation. Carter Global Foundation has major positions in infrastructure projects across California, Nevada, and Arizona, she said. 2 of those projects overlap directly with negotiations that Blackwood Holdings is currently pursuing. Ethan crossed his arms slowly. I am aware. Victoria studied him for a moment. Then you also understand what this situation could mean. Ethan looked out the window again before responding. Yes. Victoria placed the tablet on the desk beside her and folded her hands together. If Maya Carter publicly resumes her role at the foundation tomorrow, there is a strong possibility that the board will learn what happened tonight. Ethan finally turned toward her. And what exactly do you believe will happen if they do? Victoria hesitated briefly before answering. Financial decisions are rarely personal, she said carefully. But they are influenced by perception. Ethan gave a faint nod. You mean respect. Victoria did not respond to the word, but the silence itself confirmed the point. Across the room, Vanessa leaned against the doorway, listening with growing unease. This is ridiculous, she said quietly. You are talking about billion-dollar negotiations because of one awkward dinner. Ethan looked at her directly. It was not awkward for Maya. Vanessa shifted slightly, the weight of that observation becoming harder to dismiss. Victoria moved toward the tall bookshelf along the wall, her voice thoughtful now. Carter Global has been extremely selective about their partnerships, she said. In the last decade, they have declined more proposals than they have accepted. Ethan nodded. They only work with organizations they trust. Victoria turned slowly to face him, which means that tonight may have damaged something far more valuable than social appearances. Ethan's expression remained steady, though the meaning of her words was clear. The Blackwood family had always believed their reputation alone guaranteed influence in any negotiation. Yet influence depended on perception, and perception could change quickly. Vanessa spoke again, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. So what are we supposed to do now? Ethan looked once more toward the dark road beyond the estate gates where Maya's car had disappeared hours earlier. Now, he said quietly, we wait. Victoria frowned slightly. For what? Ethan answered with calm certainty. For the moment when Maya Carter decides what the future of Carter Global Foundation will look like. The room fell silent again as the implications settled over them. Because somewhere across the country, while the Blackwood family tried to understand what had already happened, Maya Carter was preparing to step into a boardroom where decisions were measured not by pride or assumptions, but by power. And for the first time since the Blackwood Empire had been built, that power might now rest entirely in the hands of the woman they had chosen to underestimate. The first light of morning spread slowly across the skyline of San Francisco as the glass walls of the Carter Global Foundation headquarters reflected the rising sun in quiet golden waves. The building stood 32 stories above Market Street, a sleek structure of steel and glass that symbolized one of the most discreet yet powerful financial institutions in the country. Inside the executive boardroom on the top floor, a long black conference table stretched beneath a ceiling of soft recessed lighting while the city awakened far below. Maya Carter sat at the head of the table, her posture calm and composed as she reviewed the digital reports displayed on the tablet in front of her. Around her sat 12 members of the Carter Global Board, individuals who collectively represented decades of financial experience across banking, infrastructure, healthcare, and global investment markets. They had gathered for the quarterly strategy meeting, but the atmosphere carried a quiet sense of anticipation that had not been present at previous meetings. Daniel Carter entered the room with a tablet in hand and gave Maya a respectful nod before taking his seat along the side of the table. All board members are present, he said calmly. Maya looked up briefly, her expression thoughtful yet steady. Thank you, Daniel. The large screen along the wall illuminated with financial projections and international project maps as the meeting began. Maya spoke with the measured clarity that had guided Carter Global Foundation for years. Our renewable infrastructure expansion in California is moving into its second phase, she said. The Nevada Energy Corridor remains ahead of schedule, and the healthcare initiative in Oregon has secured federal partnership approval. The board members listened attentively, several of them making notes as she continued outlining the foundation's strategic plans. Yet one of them finally leaned forward with a question that carried more curiosity than the financial updates themselves. Miss Carter, said Thomas Reynolds, a senior board advisor. Before we proceed further, there is a matter that has come to our attention overnight. Maya's eyes moved toward him calmly. Please continue. Thomas folded his hands together on the table. Several financial news outlets are reporting that Blackwood Holdings intends to bid on the Western Infrastructure Partnership contract. Maya nodded slightly. Yes, their proposal has been under review. Another board member spoke up. The Blackwood family has historically been aggressive in their negotiations, she said. But their public reputation remains strong. They are considered a reliable partner by many investment groups. Maya did not immediately respond. Instead, she looked toward the large window overlooking the city where the morning sunlight now stretched across the bay in soft reflections. Daniel glanced briefly toward her, aware that the foundation's relationship with Blackwood Holdings had just become far more complicated than the board understood. Thomas Reynolds studied Maya carefully before speaking again. If Blackwood Holdings secures that contract, it will significantly increase their influence along the West Coast infrastructure network. Maya finally turned back toward the table. Her voice remained calm, but the quiet authority behind it filled the room with sudden focus. Influence depends on partnership, she said. The board members listened closely. And partnerships, Maya continued, depend on trust. The statement carried a subtle weight that several of them immediately recognized. Thomas leaned forward slightly. Are you suggesting there may be concerns regarding Blackwood Holdings? Maya paused for a moment before answering. The room remained completely silent as she spoke with calm precision. Carter Global Foundation evaluates every partnership based on values, transparency, and long-term alignment, she said. Those standards will remain unchanged. Daniel quietly activated another screen displaying the foundation's list of potential infrastructure partners. Several names appeared, each representing major global investment groups. Noticeably absent from the list was Blackwood Holdings. The board members exchanged thoughtful glances as the implications settled in. Thomas Reynolds looked back toward Maya. Does this mean Carter Global Foundation will not support the Blackwood proposal? Maya rested her hands calmly on the table. Her expression revealed nothing beyond steady resolve. It means, she said quietly, that every organization must demonstrate why they deserve partnership. The room remained silent for several seconds as the board absorbed the message. Thousands of miles away in Connecticut, the Blackwood family was only beginning to understand the consequences of the previous night. But in this room, beneath the rising California sunlight, the direction of the future had already begun to shift. The Carter Global Foundation boardroom remained quiet for several moments after Maya Carter finished speaking, the subtle hum of the city beyond the glass walls filling the silence as the board members absorbed the implications of her words. Outside, the San Francisco morning had fully awakened. Sunlight reflected across the bay, illuminating the skyline with a calm brilliance that contrasted sharply with the careful calculations unfolding inside the room. Thomas Reynolds leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression thoughtful rather than surprised. He had worked in international finance for more than 30 years and recognized the quiet signals that indicated a strategic shift. Maya had not raised her voice, nor had she criticized Blackwood Holdings directly, but the meaning behind her statement had been unmistakably clear. Partnerships required trust, and trust, once damaged, could not be restored through reputation alone. Another board member, Margaret Lee, adjusted her glasses as she studied the partner list displayed on the large screen. Carter Global has always prioritized alignment with our long-term values, she said carefully. If Blackwood Holdings wishes to participate in the Western Infrastructure Partnership, they will need to demonstrate those values just like every other applicant. Daniel Carter gave a small nod, confirming the procedural reality behind the statement. Their proposal is still in the review phase, he said. However, final partner selection remains entirely under the board's discretion. Maya remained calm at the head of the table, her attention focused on the financial projections displayed across her tablet. She had not returned to San Francisco to discuss personal matters, and the board understood that the foundation's mission required discipline above emotion. Yet everyone in the room also understood that leadership decisions were never made in isolation from character. Thomas Reynolds finally spoke again. Miss Carter, he said respectfully, Blackwood Holdings has historically performed well in large-scale infrastructure negotiations. Their financial capability is not in question. The question before us is whether they remain aligned with the standards Carter Global expects from its partners. Maya lifted her gaze slightly, the morning light reflecting across the conference table as she considered the question. Financial capability alone has never been our deciding factor, she said calmly. Our projects influence communities, economies, and public trust. That responsibility requires partners who understand that influence must be exercised with integrity. Several board members nodded quietly in agreement. Carter Global Foundation had built its reputation not only through financial success, but through careful stewardship of the projects it supported. Daniel activated another set of documents on the screen displaying performance metrics from several competing infrastructure firms. At present, he explained, There are 4 qualified candidates for the Western Infrastructure Partnership contract. Blackwood Holdings remains one of them, but the board has not yet finalized its recommendation. Maya studied the figures briefly before responding. Then we will continue evaluating all candidates based on the same principles that have guided Carter Global since its founding. Her voice remained composed, yet there was a quiet finality in the statement. Across the table, Margaret Lee folded her hands thoughtfully. That approach has served the foundation well, she said, and it reinforces why our partners trust our decisions. The meeting continued as the board reviewed financial reports, regulatory updates, and project timelines. Yet beneath the professional discussion, one fact remained clear to everyone present. The direction of the Western Infrastructure Partnership now rested entirely within this room. Thousands of miles away in Connecticut, the Blackwood family had spent the night considering the consequences of their actions. But here in San Francisco, decisions would not be guided by regret or social status. They would be guided by values. As the board meeting concluded, Daniel gathered his documents while the other members prepared to leave the room. Thomas Reynolds paused beside Maya. Before exiting, "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "our partners trust your judgment. Whatever decision you ultimately make regarding Blackwood Holdings will shape the direction of this project for decades." Maya gave a calm nod, her expression thoughtful as she looked out toward the bright horizon stretching across the bay. Influence did not need to be announced to be understood. And for the first time since leaving the Blackwood estate, Maya Carter felt completely certain that the choices ahead would be guided not by pride or revenge, but by the quiet principles that had built Carter Global Foundation into one of the most respected investment institutions in the world. The Carter Global headquarters slowly emptied as the board members departed one by one, their quiet footsteps fading down the glass corridor while the city of San Francisco continued to unfold beneath the morning sun. Inside the boardroom, Maya Carter remained seated for several moments after the meeting concluded, her gaze resting on the wide window overlooking the bright horizon where the bay stretched toward the distant bridges. The city below moved with its usual rhythm of traffic, business meetings, and ambition, yet the calm silence inside the room allowed her thoughts to settle with unusual clarity. Daniel Carter remained near the conference table organizing the final documents from the meeting before approaching her with the same respectful composure he had maintained throughout the morning. "The board supports your evaluation process," he said quietly. "The Western Infrastructure Partnership will remain under review until the final vote next week." Maya nodded once, her expression thoughtful. "Good. Every partner deserves a fair evaluation." Daniel studied her briefly, understanding the deeper meaning behind the words. "There has also been a message from Blackwood Holdings," he added carefully. Maya turned slightly toward him. "From Ethan?" Daniel confirmed with a small nod. "He requested a meeting. He said the matter is personal rather than corporate." Maya looked back toward the sunlight reflecting across the water outside the building. For a moment she said nothing. The distance between Connecticut and California felt far greater than the thousands of miles that separated them. Finally she spoke softly. "What did you tell him?" Daniel replied with professional neutrality. "I informed him that your schedule is currently full due to the board meeting and upcoming project reviews." Maya allowed a faint smile to appear. That was accurate. Daniel hesitated briefly before continuing. He sounded sincere. Maya did not respond immediately. The memories of the previous night returned quietly in her mind. The dinner table. The calm certainty in Victoria Blackwood's voice. The moment Ethan remained silent while assumptions filled the room. Those memories did not bring anger. Instead, they brought clarity. "Respect cannot be requested," she said quietly, repeating the words she had spoken on the terrace the night before. Daniel nodded slightly. "No," he agreed. "It must be chosen." Meanwhile, nearly 3,000 miles away, Ethan Blackwood stood in the executive office of Blackwood Holdings overlooking the skyline of Manhattan. The early afternoon light reflected across the glass towers surrounding the building while the city moved with relentless energy below. Ethan had spent the entire morning reviewing reports, investor messages, and strategic plans related to the Western Infrastructure Partnership. Yet none of the documents in front of him carried the same weight as the quiet realization forming in his mind. Maya Carter had never needed the Blackwood name to define her place in the world. She had chosen to stand beside him simply because she believed in their relationship. and that choice had been met with silence when it mattered most. Ethan turned away from the window and looked down at the message he had sent earlier requesting the meeting. There had been no reply yet. Back in San Francisco, Maya finally stood from her chair and walked slowly toward the large window at the end of the boardroom. The reflection in the glass showed the calm confidence that had guided Carter Global Foundation for years. Wealth and influence had never been the true foundation of her decisions. Character had always mattered more. She looked out across the city skyline as the sunlight brightened the bay below, her voice quiet but certain. "Daniel," she said, "when the time is right, I will speak with Ethan." Daniel gave a respectful nod. "Of course." Maya continued watching the horizon for another moment before adding softly, "But not because of business." Daniel understood immediately. Some decisions shaped corporations. Others shaped lives. And as the morning light spread across the city of San Francisco, Maya Carter knew that the future ahead would no longer be defined by the expectations of the Blackwood family, but by the quiet strength she had carried all along.